Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and begin. My name is Lib Caldwell, and this is my dear friend, Carol Wehrheim. Carol lives in Skillman, New Jersey, and used to live in Princeton, and as she would say, as she introduces herself, but I have no affiliation whatsoever with Princeton Theological Seminary, because she's a graduate of McCormick Theological Seminary, where I had the joy of teaching for 30 years in Christian formation, religious education. The word kind of changes. Christian religious education, you can pick the word you like. We're here together because we love teaching together, and we write together. We just enjoy each other's company. And so today we're going to be, if you read the advertisement about this, we're really going to be sticking pretty close to what we said. We have a lot of virtual participants. We want to welcome them. There were like 40 of you signed up, and there are equal numbers signed up to be here virtually. So we welcome our virtual participants. And have you been in other workshops that are hybrid? So the drill goes like this. Sonia is here to field comments and from the chat feature of the virtual participants, and so their way of participating, you'll get to raise your hand, ask a question, engage with us. They will do so with the chat feature. James is here from the tech team and keeping us moving ahead, making sure everything works okay. I think with all this support, we're going to be fine. The only caveat I have is we will be following through a PowerPoint for you. If you have downloaded the APCE app and you've clicked on our workshop, then the handout for this workshop is available there. We did not do paper, so that trying to save a few trees. So the handout is there on the app, and if you don't have it and you have not downloaded the app and you want a copy of it, if you'll just give us your name and email, and we'll be glad to forward it to you. But we will be looking at that. I do have it as a PowerPoint, so you're not going to miss out. But if you want it for future use, you can let us know, and we'll be glad to send it to you. The final caveat is, and James says it's okay. He says it's really quite okay. I could not figure out a way to embed a link in the PowerPoint to the Kindle books that we're going to be reading with you. There doesn't seem to be a way, and James confirms that there's no simple way to do that. So we're going to be reading 4 stories to you that we think represent some of the most interesting and diverse kind of writing of children's picture books, books that we think everybody should own, and books that educators and clergy should know about, and can be used both in children's times in worship, in preaching as examples, in recommendations for families to use at home. The big thing, as you were listening to John Pavelet's today, that transition that we've been in for the last 3 years, as we just simply try to figure out, A, how to keep on going, and B, how do we, if we were involved in making Advent boxes and Lent boxes for families and passing everything on to the families to do, and now all of a sudden they are coming back, and who's coming back, and how do we support families to engage in faith formation with their children? So the grace of story, here we are, and we welcome you, and Carol's going to begin.
I like to tell stories. I especially like to tell Bible stories. Last week, someone asked, "What is your favorite volunteer activity?" And without a blink of an eye, I said, telling the story in worship. Because that is a magical, wonderful, grace-filled moment. So, Lib said, well, tell them how you do that. I have been doing this for about 30 years. I know I look very young. About 30 years. I tell the story in worship 2 or 3 times a month. And I would do it every week if I could. So, when I first began, I had to write the stories. I didn't have a collection of them. This was the process. I would read the story in 2 or 3 translations and in a couple of children's Bible story books, if I could find the story. Then I would read commentaries about the text and take some notes. Then I would tell the story, write it down in my own words, without looking at the text or the commentaries. Just tell what I remembered. Then I'd go back and check what I wrote against the text and the commentaries and make corrections. Then the last step, I would rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and rehearse. Someone said to me one Sunday, "Do you practice telling the story before you tell it on Sunday?" I said, "Oh, yes." I used to have a cat, so I used to say I told it to my cat. I don't have a cat now. I tell it to the living room window that faces a field. But anyway, I tell it because I want to know it so well that when that baby starts to cry, it won't knock me off the story. Or when that little boy sitting at my feet starts doing something, it won't throw me for a loop. But telling that story, whether it's in worship or in Vacation Bible School, is just the most wonderful time I've ever had in my life. It's a moment of grace for the children and the adults, because sometimes you can not hear a pin drop in the sanctuary. But it's also a moment of grace for me. It is just a wonderful time. And I told the story last Sunday, and we have 2 services, so I do it twice. I hate to do it twice. I'm all up for the first one. And the second one, and the first one is when church school, there's more kids there. The second time, there may be a handful of children. But last Sunday in the second service, I told the story, and my friend David, who is autistic and is now in his 30s, sits in the front row, applauded at the end of the story. And the pastor, who was coming towards the pulpit, said, "Carol, you had those 3 girls in the palm of your hand." Now, I have to confess that what was in my head was to make some quip back to him like, "And don't you wish you could do that with the sermon?" But I didn't, but he actually does a very good job. But that's the moment of grace for me with stories, is telling it to children, adults, young people, anytime. And then Lib's going to tell you about writing the stories.
Would it be possible for somebody to close our doors to our room? I'm just finding it, I love laughter, but it's finding it a little distracting. It sounds to me like when Carol talks about that the rehearsal and the preparation, that it's almost like it's a spiritual practice for you. And one of the things you know about children's times in worship is there are really great ways to do those, and there are really bad ways to do those. And I used to teach my students, I'll come back and haunt you for the rest of your life if you stand above them and give them a moral object lesson as a sermon, and something so abstract that they can't even deal with it. So when Carol talks about telling a story, I think of it as her spiritual practice. And I think maybe we could involve more people in doing these times with kids, or even being church school teachers, which you know how hard that is to get, or even parents who think, "No, I can't do that. I'm exhausted. I do everything else. I can't be their spiritual formation person too." That when you tell a story, then it can become your own spiritual practice, that thing that nurtures your soul. And when you read a story that many times and you practice it that many times, then you've got that story embedded in you, and you will not forget it. So when that lectionary cycle comes around in 2 more years, you know that story. So Carol's talked about the rhythm of reading the Bible, and my couple of minutes on this is as a writer, and author, and would-be biblical scholar. I always think if I had found theological education as my first call rather than religious education, maybe I would have followed the path of studying biblical studies. But I got there too late, and that's a 10-year. And I didn't have 10 years. I didn't have 10 years of graduate school left because of the age I was when I started at the program. But I'm really interested in how biblical scholarship changes and how we have new insights about texts. One of the things I've observed in the medical community is I'm at the age where I have a lot of friends who are getting parts replaced. Yeah, shoulders, knees, hips, and they all tell me their stories, and I'm not as good as John Pavlitz about listen. I try to be a really good listener, and because this is a hard thing for people, and I'm just amazed when they tell me their stories about how they get these parts replaced, and I know I've had friends who had hips replaced 20 years ago, and how the technology has changed in medicine. Everything changes. And if you're in ministry in the children's hospital in your community and they're dealing with illnesses with a child, the things that they can do now they couldn't do 10 years ago. So all that changes. And biblical scholarship is the same way. If the books you studied in grad school, if you went to grad school, you went to seminary, you went to PSCE, Union Theological Seminary, Charlotte campus or Richmond campus, or you went to McCormick, or you went to Austin, or wherever you went, Columbia. The things you learned in biblical studies classes, unless you've kept up, they're going to be dated because that field changes that fast. So my whole thing about children's stories in Bibles is that we have to teach the children and youth stories so they don't have to unlearn things later. I don't want kids, and I used to watch it in seminary when one of the Old Testament professors would talk about Jonah as myth and story, and people would just start, no, literal. There's a fish. There's a big fish. There's a whale. Yeah, and they had been taught a literal understanding of the Bible, and it would just that kind of pull the rug underneath your faith kind of thing. Now, and I'm not exaggerating, and for some, if you have the Bible is literally true, every single word, and that's what you've been taught and grown up with, and it's really hard when somebody says, well, why do you think that book is in the Bible? What is it about? And is it really about a big fish? I mean, it got so bad for me that when Carol and I did our Bible story book, Growing in God's Love, we wouldn't let them include a picture of a fish because I think children's Bible story books embed a particular image with the pictures that they use. And so if you look at, I did a review for a book I wrote about reading the Bible with children. I looked at 25 different Bible story books, and there's always a fish. And so is the fish the center of the story? So if you know Jonah, and you've done some recent biblical interpretation and read some commentary work, that you know the arc of the story, that's a really big arc when you get to Jonah and he gets inside a fish for 3 days and then he gets vomited up. Well, kids love the story because there's vomit involved, right? Right? It's the dirty stuff they love to hear about. But really, is the point of the story about that, or is it really about a guy who didn't really want to go to people that were different from him and that he didn't like? And if you look at the arc of the story through that lens, that it's really about a prophet sent by God who didn't want to do what God wanted him to do because the Ninevites were not people he liked, and they were his enemy. And so if you reframe the story, it's not really about a big fish swallowing somebody, but it's really about who do we like, who do we not like, why, who does God send us to? So reading with insights from recent biblical scholarship matters, and I just encourage you to, as you look at biblical texts, biblical stories, that you consider the sources that you look at. I think it requires, as on the PowerPoint here, sitting with a text with imagination yourself. So Carol's example of consulting, reading the text, And I'm working on a book right now for Psalm study for Westminster John Knox for next year, and one Psalm a week for the season of Lent. And it's really become a spiritual practice for me, and I'm in week 7, and it was really hard to be writing these during Advent. But I sit with the Psalm, and I look at it from 3 translations and 2 paraphrases. So I've got a great paraphrase book of Sister Juanita Colon, Lectio Divina, that she wrote, and then Eugene Peterson's The Message, I think, is a really interesting paraphrase. And then translations, 3 translations. So, for example, Common English Bible is my favorite because Carol and I both worked on that when it was being translated and developed in NRSV UE, updated edition, though there's not much updated in the NRSV, but nevertheless it's there. And finally, I've just become familiar with a new translation that I'm loving of the Old Testament, Robert Alter. Robert Alter, who is not really, you would say, as a biblical scholar, but English professor, right, Carol? And his books, his translations of the Old Testament are amazing. So when I prepare to write and work on a biblical story, I do it much like Carol does for a child or for a teenager, or in my case, writing for adults. I sit with the text myself. I see how it's been translated or paraphrased. What do I notice? What's a word? What's an image that pops out? And what do I need more help with as I get into it? What commentary work? So that's kind of my process. We're going to move to 4 stories that we think are good examples of both biblical stories and stories that are contemporary stories that can have biblical connections. So these are the 4 stories we're going to be looking at, and we're going to, each one we will be reading and showing as Kindle, so that our virtual participants can also see them. We also have them all up here physically. After we read a story, I'll be taking turns. We're going to, and we're watching the time for you, so we want to keep moving through. So our goal is 12 to 15 minutes on each story, so we keep going. We're going to be inviting you to comment after the story. How is it similar to or different from the biblical story in the case with the 2 biblical stories that we have? What connections do you make? What do you hear or see in the story that invites new ways of thinking or teaching with children? What's a question you might use in engaging children with this story? And we can remind you of these questions. The slide's going to have to go away as we do the Kindle. But yeah, you could take a picture with your phone. Good idea. So here we go. And Carol's going to do the first one. And she can say a little bit about why we're doing this story. Since she's reading it to you, you're not going to have to worry about, well, I can't see those words. It's so tiny. She's going to read it to you. What we really would hope you can see in this is also the artwork, because we love the artwork. So, Carol, on this one, just click on that little thing to get to the second page. So,
Except I can't see that.
see that? Just click on that when you want to.
Yeah.
Put the little green, or I can do it for you.
I do.
Okay, you can do that.
I have to put my glasses on. So our Bible storybook, the Growing in God's Love, has 3 stories from the book of Esther. And as we were selecting the stories, to select 150 stories from each part of the Bible is quite a task. But I have always loved Queen Vashti. And I've told that story a couple of times. It's not in the lectionary. We could not find it in any children's Bible storybook. But we knew we wanted to include it in ours. So we have 3 stories from the book of Esther. chapter 1, which is Vashti, and then 2 more. But if you'll look in our story Bible book, you will find that each one has a different artist illustrating it. Because we don't want children to get the idea that there's one way that a biblical character looks. And they're very different. You won't see that on these slides because you only see it from the same one.
We can show them the other.
Can I make it larger?
No, we can't.
No, okay. Then I'll get my book.
You need to read your book. Yeah, James tried.
You put it there. Okay. That's okay. I'm very proud that I don't have to wear glasses all the time again because I had cataract surgery. So, but that's just a little small for me. Okay. Queen Vashti says no. What do you think it would like to be a king or queen? Could you do whatever you wanted? Eat dessert first? Stay up late? Queen Vashti decided there was something she would not do. King Ahasuerus ruled over the land from Ethiopia to India. He liked to have parties to show how rich and important he was. One time he had a party for all the generals and governors of the lands around him. This party lasted for 180 nights. But one party wasn't enough. When it was over, he had another party. To this one, he invited the men of Susa, where his royal palace was. The party was in the beautiful courtyard. The marble pillars were draped with expensive blue cloth held up by silver rings. The floor glimmered with beautiful colored stones. At the same time, Queen Vashti gave a party for the women of Susa. They were in another part of the palace where the women of the court lived. On the 7th night of this party, the king was feeling pretty good. He wanted to show off his beautiful queen. He sent 7 servants to get Queen Vashti. The king says you are to come to him and wear your crown. He wants all the men to see what a beautiful queen he has. Now, Vashti knew it was dangerous not to obey the king, but she was having her own party. She gave the servants a message for the king. I will not come. When the king got Queen Vashti's message, he was angry. He said to his advisors, "This cannot be. No one can refuse the king's command. What can I do?" The advisors huddled and talked. They said to King Ahasuerus, "The queen cannot be allowed to do this. If our wives find out the queen did not obey the king, they will stop listening to us. You must remove the crown from Vashti. Send word to all the people of your kingdom that she is no longer your queen." And this is what the king did. Meanwhile, Vashti never had to come to the king again. Now, when I've told the story, I've said, and I think she liked it that way. So I don't know how well you know chapter 1 of Esther, but what from that text did you hear or didn't hear in the story I read?
Someone standing up for themselves.
Okay, you heard that. There was someone standing up for themselves, right? Right. There's more detail about the courtyard in the text, which I sometimes include in when I tell the story. We did have a number count for this that I had to adhere to. And there's a bit more about the going back and forth between the king and his advisors too. But you can see from this how you can shorten the story and get the essence of the story without giving all the details that are in the text, right? So what from this story might be new or something different to teach or discuss with children? You said it would be of someone setting up for themselves, right? Mm-hmm.
What they knew to be true or right.
What they knew to be true or right. Mm-hmm. Yes.
When it's okay to say no.
when it's okay to say no, an important thing for kids to understand, isn't it?
Right over here.
Yes. Oh,
That was, I think that's an important thing. And just that she has a voice, because it's kind of glossed over in some of the other interpretations that we
yes,
read.
that's right.
That's a nice bit of favorite, kind of glossed over.
Yes.
So thank you, I love this.
Yeah, but a lot of people know the Esther story, that they don't know about Vashti. Yeah, that's right. Over here, yes.
That a woman's name is being used in the Old Testament, since not that many.
Okay, but this was a woman. This woman had a name, right? Right. Not every woman in the Old Testament is given a name, right? Yes.
It can be risky to speak up.
It can be risky to speak up, and she was aware of that, wasn't she? Yeah. Right. Okay. Any other comment you'd like to make about this story?
Read the questions that
Okay.
that you wrote. So, and one of the things we wanted in this Bible story book were, I must say it's not original. If you, one of my favorite Bible story books is done by, the Brethren, right? Is it Brethren?
Oh,
Now I can't
no, it's not the
remember.
Brethren.
The Shine On Bible?
Shine On,
Yeah.
thank you.
That's the Mennonites.
Mennonites, thank you.
Yes.
The Shine On Story Bible, I love, and that was my first image that you could actually do good art for children. A, and B, and then engage them with a story. So they have three questions for all of their stories. I love that Shine On. So in that sense,
In that same sense, we incorporated 3 questions at the end of each story in Growing in God's Love. A here question. Pretend you are in the huddle with the king's advisors. What are they saying? A C question. If you were going to build a model of the palace courtyard, what would you use for the marble pillars or the floor with beautiful stones? An act question. Vashti was a strong woman when she refused to do what the king wanted. What strong women do you know or know about? Wouldn't that be a wonderful conversation with a child? Okay, next story.
well, I love what you said about, is there anything from online, Sonia? Is anybody?
Just some comments. Let me see, something just popped up here. She said, here's one from Kathy, who says, while we talked about how it empowered women to stand up, was Vashti not executed for this? What do we say to the children about that?
She was not executed. Vashti was not executed. She was sent to live in the court of women. So what I really think she probably felt pretty good about. She didn't have to worry about the king anymore. And my Old Testament scholar who lives next door to me agrees.
So she lives next door to Catherine Dubes Seckenfeld, who retired beloved professor from Princeton Theological Seminary, Hebrew Bible.
Yes.
What a great neighbor to have. So you have a question, you just run next door, right? This is the second illustration for that story, and one of the things, the reason we're showing it to you is just to see, like with the Shine On, who used different artists. That was what we asked for and got. We pretty much got most of everything we wanted in this Bible story book, but different artists are so important, and yeah. So here's the second illustration, and I'll just show you. So in some cases, they have, most denominations have a lot of stock art that they own for curriculum, and so we did get some of the stock art that's in Presbyterian curriculum. So I think that's obviously an example of one. And there is the king anointing Esther. But then this art was new for the book, as was the Vashti story. So you can see the different skin tones that this artist used to represent Esther. Okay. second story we're going to be looking at is a contemporary story, and it's called Here, the Dot We Call Home. One of the projects I'm working on right now is how do we connect biblical texts about caring for the earth, the environment, being good stewards. That's that, Genesis 1, I put you in charge. And are there other texts and stories across the Old Testament and the New Testament that we could gather together as we think about our responsibility as caretakers of the earth, which is so important, continues to be so important. That good news a few weeks ago that the ozone seems to be not as in bad shape as it was before we started paying attention. Think how long it's been in the lifetime of some of us in this room that Rachel Carson first started talking about this. And so there's so many, and there's a network I know, I don't know about in the Reformed Church or other parts or partners in APCE, but I know in the Presbyterian Church there's a rich history of commitment to caring for the earth. So this is one I found, and I don't remember where I found it, but here is the dot we call home. Think about, again, as we were discuss this one, what connections do you make between this and biblical stories? Or what do you see that invites a new way of thinking? Or what's a question you might use to engage? So this one does not have any kind of a leader's guide with it. It's called the dot we call home, and it's on your handout, so you don't have to worry about writing it down unless you just want to. Laura Alari is the author, and it's illustrated by Catherine Peterslund. This is my home. I live here, but I'm not the first. There were people here before me. They left some things behind. Some were good. Others were not. My home has many special places. Some are secret, like the hollow spot in the hedge, the patch of wild strawberries by the fence, my calm space in the closet under the stairs. Some I share, like the vegetable garden I planted with Grandpa, or our kitchen table. As strange as it seems, someday someone else will live here. Will they look after my special places? This is my home too. I live here, but I'm not the first. There were people here before me. Before that. Further back. Keep going. Even before. They left things behind too. Some were good. Others were not. This is my home too. It has many special places. Some are so secret, hardly anyone ever sees them. But they are still beautiful all by themselves. Someday other people will live here. Will these be special places for them too? From out here, home looks so small. How can something so small seem so big? I love my home. I wish I could wrap my arms around it, care for it all, clean it up, but it is too big and I am so small. But I can love this, and this, and this. I can look after this, and this, and this. So that is what I will do. Start here. One of the things I look for in a book that you might want to read during a children's time in worship is something that is short. My sister was a pastor in Tuscaloosa, and so during the pandemic, like everybody else, you had, what, 2 weeks to turn it around? 2 weeks to figure it out. And as John reminded us, when nobody was there but the tech guy and you and a mic velcroed or taped to the top of the pulpit, and they quickly started recording children's stories for the Children's Time so that they could have something. If they were worshiping at home, there would be something for the children. So one of the things is in your criteria of selection of stories is you want something that's, what does your children's times last? What, 5 minutes? You want to stay in the 5 to 7 minute, right? Is that about right? Yeah. So you want a story that's doable. This is I think is doable. So is this new to everybody? Does anybody know this one? This one is just I think it's fairly new. I think it's recently published. So it's a Paraclete press. That's a press I like. Paraclete. It's Roman Catholic press, and they have the denominational houses that publish children's books are fairly not a large group, and Paraclete's one I found that does books that I really like. And this one came out. I think it's this year, 2022. First printing. So. Your chance to talk for a minute with us. What did you notice? What connections do you make? Could you see yourself using this? We have a Earth Day. Everybody celebrates Earth Day, right? And you have they're all liturgies. You can download and get them. But every day there's Earth Day, right? So, would you use it? What do you think?
You could also use it during stewardship, as you're talking about your gifts and what you're taking care of.
Exactly. Perfect. It's a great stewardship. I mean, just when they think, oh, it's stewardship, they're going to talk about money, and oh God, they're going to show pie charts. I don't know about you, but when they start showing pie charts, it's just like, it just goes over my head. Can you do anything but a pie chart? I never have figured out pie charts. Math, that's not my thing. Give me color. So it'd be a great stewardship story, wouldn't it? And then you could connect that with, if you're preaching that day, because everybody, one of the things you want to do in these children's times is to connect that time with the time that's quote for, big people. What else? Anything else you noticed or liked? Yeah.
I like how it gives kids some tangible things to do at the end.
Yeah. It leaves very open-ended, don't you think? It invites you to think about the things you can do. I mean, think about, so when you do a children's time, normally you after you read a story, you have like what? You probably prepare 3 questions, is my guess. And you might get through 1. Or you might get through 2. But you always have, I would never go in with less than 3, just because you want to be prepared. But when she says at the end, so this is what I'll do, I'll start here. What would be some questions you might ask at the end? Where will you start? Yeah. Okay. Hand over there on the right.
She took my answer.
Where will you start?
What's your special place?
Oh, Don, I love that one. Do you have a special place? What is it? Didn't you love that picture of her underneath the stairs? Oh my gosh, I loved that.
I thought it was neat how they started with a home.
Mm-hmm.
That they could get that idea about someone lives here before, someone will probably live here after, and then moving into taking care of.
Further than that. Let's go
Yeah.
back. Further than that. Well, we're always looking. There's so much printed that's available that all of our denominations make available, resources, and now there's so many independent organizations, that are providing liturgy and resources for Advent, for Lent, or just amazing resources that are available that you can buy that independent resources. But I also think there's so much creativity inside all of us. So I can imagine seeing, if you're still doing, are y'all still doing VBS in probably in new ways? Yeah, you can't. I'm sorry, I tried to kill it once. I'm sorry. It's confession. Back when in the local church, I just thought, why are we doing this? This is just, I don't know. It's just one more thing women have to do. I'm sorry. As a feminist, that's just like, it's one more thing women have to do. And I know it's a joy to do it, but so we did it. So we started doing it at night, so everybody could come. And we had a group of older adults who said, "Well, I want to come." And people said, "Well, I'm going to come, but I work." So we started doing it at night, and it totally reframed it for me that it doesn't have to be just women doing this, and women. And there's so many then, where I hit the wall was there were so many women working outside the home more so than when I started in Christian education in the early 70s. Yes, there's a hand.
I have a question.
Are they worried about my confession?
Not yet. But Debbie asked, if a good question to ask would be, do you ever feel very small, or describe a sense of awe?
Do you ever feel very small or describe a sense of awe? Oh, I love those questions. Don't you love those questions? You could do a whole week of VBS, however you do it, daytime, nighttime, week, once a week for 4 weeks. This could be a curriculum. Yeah, and.
I was going to say, you could ask them, do you know somebody else's special place, and how might you help them care for their special place? Right.
How could you help them care for that special place? One of the things that saved our lives in 20 and 21 was special places outside. The people I talked to and the families, that parks you could walk in, at least in Nashville, we have so many beautiful parks, and families finding that you could safely be outside walking or hiking or following trails or picking up litter or doing those kinds of things as families or as individuals or even with friends. So, okay, well, this is here's the dot we call home. Commend it to you. We're going to move on to another contemporary story. The One Thursday Afternoon, which is a new book from Flyaway Books that just came out. Just came out in 2022. I think it came out in the fall. Is it okay if I tell my story about it as you make your way up here? I got a pre-publication copy of this, and I agreed to preach for my sister in June, I think it was, to give her a Sunday off. And wouldn't you know, no, I shouldn't say it that way. It's really a bad way to say it. You sit with your text, you start thinking ahead, at least I did, because I don't preach every Sunday, so I have the luxury of having a week to prepare and read the commentaries. And the shootings at Uvalde happened. And I called her and said, I'm stuck. I just can't not talk about this. She said, well, the church wouldn't want you to. They would want you to address it. And I said, well, it's evil. She said, it's okay if you name it what happened as evil, because it is. Don't shy away. Say the hard thing. And so I had the pre-publication copy, and I brought it with me. And my sister used it in the children's time that Sunday. My mother was a preschool teacher, and years and years ago, there was a Presbyterian church in the southern part of the United States had a curriculum called Covenant Life Curriculum, and there was a three-year-old book called The Broken Vase. Do you remember it? Oh my gosh, my mother loved that story because stuff happens. She had people that she would train as teachers and they refused to use it because it was sad. Think how far we've come since 1960-something to 2023, and we have to deal with the sad stuff, the hard stuff.
But Kathy used the book. You didn't tell Kathy. Did you tell
Kathy read the story one Thursday afternoon with the children. So it is a story that's hard.
It is a story that's hard, but it's a beautiful story. So listen for ways it connects with biblical texts or truths.
All right. Do you want me to do this for you? Okay.
I can do it.
Okay. No, you got
No.
it. Got it.
Oh, down. See,
She wants to touch the screen.
I have all touch
See,
screens at home.
I'm sorry, I have a Mac. and
terrible.
It's
I
just,
can't-
it's an old Mac.
You do it for me.
Thank you, I will.
Okay. One Thursday afternoon, Granddad picked up Ava from school. "Hey, Ava," said Granddad. "What's wrong, kiddo?" "Nothing," Ava said. "I have a little surprise for you. I packed a picnic and our paints," said Granddad. Ava didn't answer. After a while, they stopped at a nature trail. Ava sighed. "Can't we just go home?" "Not quite yet," Granddad said. "But I had a hard day. I just want to be alone right now," Ava said. "That's okay. I won't talk," said Granddad. "We can be alone together." So they were quiet. The ducks, not so much. After their picnic, Granddad asked, "Are you ready to paint?" "I guess," Ava said. "Before you use your paintbrush, Ava, use all your senses," said Granddad. Ava kept still. She looked up at the trees. She listened to the birds and smelled the cool air and felt the earth under her feet. Suddenly, look, we skipped a line. Suddenly, her cheeks felt hot and her eyes felt wet. "Granddad, I have something to say. I was so scared today. We had a lockdown drill at school. We had to hide in a safe place in our classroom. But I thought my classroom was already safe." Granddad sat close. "That does sound scary. When I was your age, we had safety drills called duck and cover. We had to hide under our desks," he said. "It was hard for us to understand. I never admitted it, but I was really scared back then. I still am sometimes." Ava took a deep breath. "Even you?" "Even me," said Granddad. "But Ava, even though the world is scary, it's really also a beautiful place." "Sometimes," Ava said. "Let's paint now." And so you have them painting. Ava felt a little better, but as Granddad went back to his easel, she felt the sadness creep back. "Granddad, you may have been scared in school, but did you ever see news reports of schools in danger?" she asked. "I sometimes do." "I didn't, Ava," said Granddad. "You're right that the world can seem pretty different than when I grew up, but whether it's scary or beautiful or both, I'm here to listen." Ava still felt a little scared, but talking helped. So did quiet. And so did painting, using all her senses. "Let's paint outside again," said Ava. Granddad smiled. "How about tomorrow?" As the leaves rustled and the ducks quacked, Ava and Granddad packed up and headed home. Now this one does have some comments from the author and illustrator. she explains how she came to write the book and talks a bit about how adults might want to think about this book with children. It's really very nice. But I have a story about this book too. So I always read the thank you or the acknowledgments, just to see if it's anybody I know, and most of the time I don't. I read this and I knew 3 people who were being thanked. And I had noted in the cover, the flyleaf of the cover, that the author lived in central New Jersey. But after I read that, I thought, that author lives in Princeton, New Jersey. So I'm going back and trying to find her, because I think this is a beautiful story. What biblical texts or stories did you connect with this as you heard it?
The Psalms.
The Psalms, yes. You could go to particular ones and make a strong connection, couldn't you? Mm-hmm. Right. Creation. And all the senses that we use to experience creation, right? Yeah. Anything over there, Sonia? No? Okay. Anyone else?
So probably related to David and Goliath, to where like David was scared about like standing up for himself.
Okay.
At first, but then he conquered those fears.
He knew God was with him, right? So it could be, you could make a connection with this story, adding on that piece to the story, the presence of God through either the Psalms or a story about people. Right. Well, there's some questions. Maybe you can try to imagine what questions Kathy used when she used the story in worship. What questions would you ask of children after hearing this story? When have you been scared? I'm curious. This is a curious question for me. It's not a question for children. It's a question for you. How many of you know that children in your community have had this kind of experience, have had lockdowns? Oh, that's frightening. That is frightening and sad. Yes?
I wonder, would this be a good transitional moment to ask kids to explain what a drill would look like, or is that a traumatizing thing to have to explain to older adults who haven't had to go through the drill?
That's a good question. I don't think it would, as an older adult, ever having gone through this drill, I don't think it takes much to figure out what it would be like. Yeah. Over here? Yes.
I would ask how the kids felt when they had to take the drill. Because I know that they all have. And to answer your question over there, my son will just happily tell you.
Yeah.
Sure.
I say he won't even be shy about it. He'll explain the entire thing to you, beginning to end, and how he felt the whole time.
And it's an empowering thing for them to be able to explain about their life, right?
Yes.
The author wrote this story because she was doing an author's talk in an elementary school, and they had a lockdown for 45 minutes. Fortunately, there was nothing. It was a false alarm, but she realized how that affected the children.
Carol, we have
Yes.
2 questions.
Oh, okay.
One is, who listens to you when you are frightened,
Who listens to you when you are frightened? Nice.
and what makes you feel safe?
What makes you feel safe? 2 very good questions, right? Right. Well, I'm so intrigued with this book now because I actually think I know when this happened, when this lockdown occurred. But it's quite. The book, she said, just wouldn't let her go. The subject wouldn't let her go. She had not planned. Apparently she's written other things and nothing like this. So, are we ready for the next one?
Sure. One other observation. Was there, I love art with children's, I love good art with children's books. I'm just really picky. And was there any illustration that you really liked? Yes.
I like the one looking down when they were hanging
Sitting next to each
out.
other, Charlie.
What?
It was,
They were sitting down.
they were sitting,
Yeah, there's
Right
a lot
before
of-
this one here.
Yeah.
Think about the angle of vision of the artist, and not just front on, but that looking down. And you liked it because
It was different from the other ones.
it is.
I liked the,
It's very different, isn't it?
Go to the last one because it has a similar view that I think is
Picking up the blanket.
yeah.
Any other? Yes.
The end of that book, I think it really is ending with hope, which we need to give children. When it talks about tomorrow, we will. And so I think a question about what do you think they did in their tomorrow, so that they can give hope in the midst of their fear.
So it ends with, as the leaves rustled and the ducks quacked, Ava and Granddad packed up and head home. So what do you think happened the next time would be the question you would ask? That's a great question. That's a great question, yeah. Anything else? Y'all are really good. Thank you so much for your excellent participation. Okay, so we couldn't do this without doing one from my favorite authors of all time. Sandy Eisenberg Sasso, yeah, what can I say? In God's Name, when we were first struggling with inclusive language for God, and adults, were resisting that, I just would give them that book to read, In God's Name, because she's one of the best. And Sandy continues to write. She's got a new one coming out. Beaming Books is the children's publishing arm of the ELCA, Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. Beaming Books is starting a nice library. They're a little bit. Flyaway's been going for 5 years, I think. Beaming Books, I think, has been going for a couple. Their volume of their books, it grows. They've got one on who is Mother God that just came out. I think it's right here. And Sandy's got a new one coming out in this year on the 23rd Psalm that she's written for Beaming Books. She continues to write on her own, but she's also a partner with Amy Jill Levine, who retired New Testament biblical scholar from Vanderbilt that I got to know when I was doing adjunct teaching there. And they couldn't find a home. No Christian publisher wanted to publish New Testament stories, parables written by a rabbi and a Jewish New Testament scholar. And they couldn't get their stories published. And so I would see AJ in the halls at Vanderbilt, and she would tell me this, and I'm thinking, they're both quite published. She's in her own New Testament studies, and like about a book a year, and Sandy with her publishing of children's books for years, and so we got I suggested that since I knew Westminster John Knox was going to start a children's imprint, which at that time they didn't know what the name was, I said, well, I know they're starting one, and I was on the publishing board at the time. I said, why don't you talk, with David Dobson? And so that worked. So they've got 4 books, all parables. The parable series I absolutely adore, because what it does, and back to my point that I began with about good biblical scholarship for children so they don't have to unlearn things later. If you grew up with a parable being taught, well, what was the little line about what a parable is? A parable is earthly story, thank you, Guy. Earthly story with a heavenly meaning. And as AJ famously writes in her book about parables, which the title is Short Stories of Jesus, stories of enigmatic something. And she totally reframes what a parable is. It is not heavenly stories with earthly meanings, though it could be. It's not designed to give you an answer. Jesus is not always, Jesus. You can't always turn everything into Jesus, but it's in Jewish tradition and in her understanding of what parables are. They're meant to provoke. They're meant to disturb. They're meant to ask you, leave you with a question. I commend her book on parables to you. But what she's doing with Sandy in these stories is in this creative writing that they do together, they are giving you what they understand a parable is supposed to do, but giving you recent scholarship and thinking, but starting with a different story. So in case you need a reminder about what the good-for-nothing tree is, it is this story in Luke 13. And I'll just read that before I do the story, just so you can, and I think about this, and this is a great way to think about what is going on in this story that is similar to or different from the biblical story. Jesus told this parable. A man owned a fig tree planted in his vineyard. He came looking for fruit on it and found none. He said to his gardener, "Look, I've come looking for fruit on this fig tree for the past 3 years and I've never found any. Cut it down. Why should it continue depleting the soil's nutrients?" The gardener responded, "Lord, give it 1 more year and I'll dig around it and give it fertilizer. Maybe it will produce fruit next year. If not, then you can cut it down." The good-for-nothing tree. Illustrated by Annie Bowler. Once a gardener planted a fig tree. Everyone was excited about watching it grow. Its leaves would give shade. Its fruit would be sweet to eat. The children could hardly wait to taste the figs. Spring bloomed to summer. Summer cooled into fall. Fall blew into winter. Winter warmed into spring. Why is it taking so long, the children asked. Why are there no figs? Some people wondered. Will that fig tree ever grow up? The gardener cautioned. It takes time. Another summer came, another winter, another fall, another spring. There were still no figs. Some people shook their heads. The tree will never amount to anything. The tree dropped a tiny leaf. It's good for nothing. 2 more leaves fell, and the tree shivered in the wind. Ah, the gardener moaned. The leaves are still so small. There's no sign of figs. This is not good at all. It's time to start over with a new tree. The children pleaded, "Not yet, please. The fig tree just needs more love." What does that remind you of? The Charlie Brown Christmas tree. It just needs some love, Charlie Brown, as he wraps his blanket, as Linus wraps his blanket around it. Ridiculous, the gardener declared. Trees don't need love. This one just doesn't grow. We should get rid of it. It's not worth waiting any longer. Please give the tree more time, the children begged. Don't give up. We'll take care of it. The gardener sighed. Go ahead. But it won't matter. The fig tree is good for nothing. That's just the way it is with some trees. The children tried anyway. They pulled weeds. They trimmed branches. They added mulch. They watered the tree. Some days they got wet too. Loving the fig tree wasn't too hard. It just took time. Summer went by and fall, winter came, spring arrived. Some people shook their heads. Look at those silly children. The good-for-nothing tree is just taking up space. Enough dilly-dallying. It's time to plant a new tree. But the children didn't want another tree. They wanted this one. And they didn't care how long it took. They loved the tree. They worked. They watched. They waited. There were still no figs. So the children tried again. They worked. And they watched. And they waited. Then as spring turned into summer, buds appeared. They were tiny, but if you looked hard enough, you could see them. The children kept watering and weeding, watching and waiting. Before long, the small leaves grew as wide as umbrellas. Then the children took a deep breath. What does our tree smell like to you? A child asked. I smell maple syrup, coconut, vanilla. Everyone agreed that the figs looked like purple raindrops. Each day, the children rested in the shade of the leaves. They picked the figs, peeled away their wrinkly skin, and ate the sweet, juicy fruit. As summer came to an end, the children sat under the tree with a picnic of homemade fig balls. It took so long to grow, one child sighed. You are right to be patient, the gardener said. That's how it is with some trees. A second child said, it isn't just some trees, it is our tree. It needed us. It needed love, and it loved us back. I'm glad we waited, a fifth child said. We never gave up. And they each took a sticky, delicious bite. The good-for-nothing tree. So one of the things that is in all four of the parable books that they've written is a note from the authors. And there's a bonus in this one that you don't get in the others. So Sandy's provided how to make fig balls. So and actually, I wanted to make fig balls and bring them to y'all, but I thought if I make them on Monday, and they're just not going to be so good by Friday. And even if I travel with them, there's no place. So I thought about making you fig balls. And it's a recipe from a cookbook. And Sandy lives in Indianapolis, Indiana. So they write in this note from authors. And one of the things that Flyaway does is, as you probably know and maybe have heard, they make handouts for kids. You can download interactive pieces, you can coloring pages, you can download discussion guides, and they're all available on the Flyaway website. But in here, the note from the authors, and back to this point of helping people understand and appreciate and use good biblical scholarship. And I think our work for helping parents know and gain some confidence. Don't you think that's what it is? Gain confidence about being the faith educators for their children at home. And so this little note gives them confidence. It's based on a parable from Luke. Parable comes from two Greek words. Para, as in parallel, means to put something side by side. Balo means to cast or to throw. Thus, a parable casts two images side by side, the story in the text and the story of our own lives. And then she goes to correct how heavenly, what is it, Guy? Heavenly.
An earthly story with a heavenly meaning.
Earthly story with a heavenly meaning. Some interpreters suggest that the fig tree represents Israel and the gardener is God or Jesus. Others see the fig tree as the temple and the gardener as the high priest, but parables need not be allegories. And that's so much what we've been taught, earlier on, that parables are allegories, heavenly, earthly meanings. Earthly stories, heavenly meanings. We are not expected to find a one-to-one correspondence between all the elements in the parable and those in our world. Parables are not designed to have special answer keys. Rather, they encourage us to think in new ways. Sometimes a tree is just a tree that takes a while to mature. Sometimes a gardener is not always willing to do the work, but every parable prompts questions and explorations. So our version of the parable highlights the value of giving all children time to grow at their own pace. Some may be late bloomers. Some need encouragement. Some may need an invitation to join others. And then they go on to talk about conversations that you could have. So before I tell you what they suggest, well, what conversations do you think you might have that are evoked by this parable of the good-for-nothing tree? Yes?
I would ask if they have a garden at home or if they've ever grown something.
Have you had a garden at home? Have you ever grown something? What did you grow? How did it go for you? How was your gardening experience? Yes?
Have you ever tried any new foods?
Great question. Have you ever tried any new foods? So which foods did you try and which ones did you like? Which ones would you do, thumbs up, thumbs down? Right? What else?
Why is it hard to wait?
Yeah. Why is it hard to wait? Why is it hard to wait? That's a great question.
Have you ever seen fruit on a tree?
Have you ever seen fruit on a tree? What kind of fruit have you seen? Remember, questions that can answer by yes or no can kind of stop, so you can always do your follow-up question. What have you seen? What kind of fruits have you seen hanging on trees? Or have you ever gone to pick fruit? Some people my sister loved to take her boys to pick blueberries, and she always had metal buckets because you got to hear the ping. What is that? Is that Blueberries for Sal? Is that children's book? You got to hear them ping when they drop in. It's really important for the sound. What else how else do you connect with this? Yeah.
When did it take you a long time to figure something out?
When would it take you a long,
When was a time
when was a time,
that it took you a long time to figure something out?
when was a time when it took you a long time to figure something out?
Or to learn how to do something?
When was a time when you had to learn to do something different, new, how to do something?
Yeah.
Great question. Yes.
When was the time you wanted to get rid of something and someone stopped you?
When was a time you wanted to get rid of something and somebody stopped you? Yes.
When was the time where your patience paid off?
Ooh, when was a time when your patience paid off? So think about all these questions you've been hearing. You could answer those questions yourself, right? There's no age limit on those questions, right? They are timeless and ageless. This would be another great curriculum, a week of parables, and use each one of these stories. Yeah, we've got to.
Okay, here's the question. When is the best time to plant a fruit tree? One answer may be 30 years ago, but the next best time is today.
When is the best time from our virtual participants to plant a fruit tree? Maybe 30 years ago, if you really want to see it, or perhaps today. That's great. That's great. So I'll read the last two paragraphs of what they suggest, and it's not a lot different from what you've said. Conversations about, has there ever been a time, Sandy Sasso is one of the best at writing questions, I think, and if you've never looked at her book on Midrash, she's got a small little book on Midrash, and she talks about how you write questions to engage a story. It's really good. Just Google her. Has there ever been a time, I mean, I can't say that Sandy, I know they both wrote this together, so I'm kind of thinking maybe AJ might write the part about the background on parables, and maybe Sandy does the other. I don't know. That I could be totally wrong on that. Consider asking these questions. Has there ever been a time when you thought that no one believed in you and what you wanted to accomplish? Have you ever thought you weren't good enough to do something? Have you ever worried that you were taking too long to learn something new? Yeah. Is that?
That was it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Has it ever taken, have you ever thought have you ever worried that you were taking too long to learn something new? Talk about across the ages. You know, I'm just getting ready to think about getting a new car because my nephew, who's an automotive engineer, wants me to have all the bells and whistles and features because, after all, Aunt Lib, you are not, 25 anymore, and you need to have all these safety features. And he's telling me what I can buy and what I can't buy, and you can't buy this car because Aunt Lib, this is not going to have what you need. You need the cameras, and you need a screen and you don't need your phone down there when you use Waze because you're taking your eyes down there. You need to be up here, and you need to be a screen that works, and don't buy this car. And I'm just worried that it's going to take me so long, to transition from my beloved Subaru to whatever he has in mind for me. Is it going to take me too long, and am I going to be too old, But so that's why I've got to do it now, And so, and that I just follow my friend Carol, who's just a couple of years older than me, and she just got a new car, 2 years ago?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
On my own.
On your own. On your own. If you have a classmate who takes longer than others to finish an assignment or to learn a new game, how can you show kindness? Other conversations may arise from the idea of waiting. Consider asking, was there ever a time when you were impatient for something to happen? Your birthday to come, a plant to grow, a cake to bake? Do you ever think that winter takes too long to leave and summer too long to arrive? Other questions about persistence. That's kind of been an interesting theme, too, in these books, isn't it? Persistence. Have you ever wanted to give up on a project because it's taking too long, or you keep making mistakes? What helps you try again? For readers of any age, are you ever like the gardener, ready to give up on something? Are you ever like one of the children, loving something or someone so much that you're willing to be patient, to reach out and to help? Love this book. Any other questions or comments? We've got a little time left. We're kind of on schedule here. Okay. do y'all know the other books? Have y'all used any of the books? Yes. Was that a hand? I'll have to, you know, the one good thing about the pandemic, I can say, is that we've all been there, and you all know about being patient with technology, right? Because you've all had to do it too, right? Okay. Yeah, the handout. Okay. So, the handout that's posted on the app that goes with this workshop, you can download. I thought we would just run through a couple of things here, and these are some books that we all have on the table, and I'm not going to comment on all of them, but if there's one you want me to one of us to comment on, we can. The children's book publishing, how do you keep up? So, for example, if I want a new book, I just pay attention to all the blogs or the things I follow, and watch Beaming Books. I watch Paraclete. I watch Flyaway. Those are the main religious publishing I look at. But if you want, do you know StoryPath from Union? Of course you do, Union Table. StoryPath is not currently adding books, but it's probably one of the best models going for children's stories like what we've been using here, connected to the lectionary, and it's still there. Yes.
The StoryPath will be brought up to date through the new Center for Excellence in Christian Education and expanded. So
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for our friend Becky Davis, who started that. Yeah, a shout out to Becky Davis, who started that StoryPath. And so if you don't know it, it follows the common lectionary, and it had been stopped about, 3 years ago, I think. So they're archived there, but it's people reviewing children's books and connecting them so how you might use them in church school or children's time or in your own preaching. And there's a question from...
and it has to do with copyright issues when reading one of the books, like online, for online worship.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you know, my sister's church does their worship via Facebook, and they've gotten stopped for copyright before, but it's never been for a children's book. It's been, and they're intentional about their permissions for everybody is about music and their liturgy. Everything is cited and they've paid for it if they're using sanctified art or if they're using, yeah. But they've got, because I sometimes worship virtually in Nashville, and it's gone, and they will shut you down. The answer is I don't know, but I know they've never been shut down for reading a children's story. She always cites the author and the illustrator. Yes, you know an answer?
Usually you do need permission, and a lot of times the authors will grant it to you. If you tell them, like, you've bought the book and that but sometimes they can't.
Publishers are probably the ones to go to. I've had questions as an author, can we use your book, God's Big Plan? And I said, it's not my permission to give because the publisher owns it. And whenever I've asked Flyaway, I send them to Flyaway or Westminster John Knox, and they have no problem giving permission. Usually they're so glad to get their book out, right? But it's probably, like you're saying, a good idea to ask in advance. Carol?
It is, because you're not just dealing with the author of the book. You have an illustrator. So it's best to go to the publisher to ask permission.
There is another question. I think I know the answer to this, but it has to do with, is there a master list of all the books that you have up there that can be sent to the people online, or is it already?
If they've registered online and they have access to the app, and the app then has our workshop, and our workshop embedded with the link to the handout, so they should be able to access it. And all of these are on that. So this is a book of, this is a list of some current favorites of of ours. Some of them are fairly new. Anybody have a question about, yes.
What do you love about Mother God? It's right in front of
I kind of got dinged about this last year because I write with Ted Hebert, is a former a colleague of mine from McCormick, and we're working on some stories related to Genesis 1 and 2, related to in the environment and the care for the earth. And I said, I used feminine language for God, she, in my story of, and I got some pushback saying, because of, we're trying not to use pronouns and, in our language. So being aware of people for whom, they and them and theirs is their personal pronoun. And so what do I think about it? I as a woman and a feminist, I've long wished that we could have some inclusive language for God. And I like to use some feminine imagery just because I don't think God is gendered. And so when I come to this book, it's beautifully illustrated. And I think it adds to the collection of books. Years and years ago, Westminster did this little board book, God is Like a Mother Hen, that we keep trying to get them to republish. That it's right from a biblical text, so a feminine imagery for God. So it's one that just came out. I think it's beautifully done, and I'm glad it's here.
Will we be able to look through?
Yeah, anytime. Yeah.
Thank you. In confirmation, we're trying to name what we call God, and I think it's hard sometimes to find a feminist version.
Okay.
And for those whose maybe father is a difficult word, that was what I was curious.
Exactly, and I also recommend Sandy Sasso, In God's Name. Yeah. Yes.
Just a quick shout out for the God's Holy Darkness that is there. I don't see it on the list on the screen, but it has really stretched me, the ways that we use language of light and language of darkness as good and bad, which often has racial undertones. That is a phenomenal children's book that offers the times where the darkness is beautiful, and it's really stretched me in my preaching. I just
Thank you. It's not on the list because I literally just found it, and I had to send we had to send this list in, a month ago. So thank you for that. The title is God's Holy Darkness, and the author is Sherry Green, Sharei Green, and Becca, Beckah, Selnick, Selnick, illustrated by Nikki Faison, Faison. It's Beaming Books. Remember I mentioned Beaming Books, the imprint of ELCA, and I think it just came out. So thank you for that. Okay. I mentioned StoryPath, but the other place I go to that I find really helpful, do you all know Picture Book Theology? Okay, Picture Book Theology is a great website if you are looking for a book around a particular topic like fear, race, poverty. You just, at the very bottom of their opening page on their website, you can just click on that word and all up. And she seems to, I kind of wish we could have gotten her here because I think she's an Episcopal. I think she lives here in Birmingham, and APCE's never connected with her, and sometimes the website just kind of doesn't get much added. She takes a break, but she's got some great posts up there, some blogs about guidelines for connecting contemporary books with faith or theology. She does a really good job with that. Any other questions about any of the books on this slide that are listed here? If you want in your library, I always think that you need a book there that you just never know when you might need it. Thinking about pastoral care issues with youth and children, the person who's really taking on the hard stuff right now is Anastasia Higginbotham. In her books, You Ruined It and What You Don't Know, A Story of Liberated Childhood. You Ruined It is a story about a kid who believes he's gay. And it's an incredible story. What You Don't Know, A Story of Liberated Childhood is a story about a child who was abused. So she takes on hard stuff and does it really well. And she's an interesting artist. She's an interesting artist, and she she does her own illustrations, so she does a lot of collage and torn paper collage and just putting together with ephemera and things she's got around on her storyboards, and she's really interesting. So let's see what else I've got here. 2 websites, I've already mentioned that. So in the handout, when I'm working on something, these are some of the commentaries I use and some websites that I think are really doing a good job of being accessible. One of the beauties of biblical scholarship right now is when you pick up a study Bible, like the Common English Study Bible, or if you went to seminary, you probably use the Abingdon Study Bible with notes. The notes that are written now are accessible to any of us. They're not just for biblical scholars or for seminary graduates. It's a lovely thing that study Bibles now are accessible to all of us, and they're great tools. So these are some of the websites that I use when working on a particular biblical text. Left Behind and Loving It is a new one. It's I got these from my sister. These are stuff she uses. Left Behind and Loving is a blog spot, and if you studied Greek in seminary and you still like to keep up with your Greek or Hebrew, I am woefully unable to keep up with my Hebrew, but I still can keep up with some Greek. And this guy and this Left Behind and Loving It just works with Greek and the English, and so it's even if you haven't ever studied Greek but you're interested in language, it's a great one. And the other one that I used to listen to when I was driving back from Tuscaloosa to Nashville after visiting my sister, The First Reading is a great podcast, and you can just get it downloaded on your phone, and it's these young biblical scholars. I think one of them's at CTS in Indianapolis, and one might be at Emory, and they just talk back and forth about the Old Testament text for the Sunday that's coming up. And it's just 30 minutes, called First Reading, and it's really engaging. So, Q&A, questions, answers. Anything you want to share with the group about, the way you use children's stories? Or is there just a story that you love that we haven't talked about, that you want everybody to know about? Or are you exhausted? Breathe in, breathe out, as John says. Breathe in, breathe out. Guy.
You and I have talked that the best children's book of all time is Ferdinand. So
Ferdinand.
You know that, the book.
Ferdinand.
And recently, when we were closed down because of the weather, Amy and I watched the movie that came out.
Oh, there's a movie?
Yeah, and I couldn't believe how good it was.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't exactly faithful to the book, but it was faithful enough. And I thought, man, that's a great thing I could use in the Faith and Film series.
Yeah.
For adults, I usually, in what I do at least one cartoon movie for them. And I was so pleased to see that come out.
So how do you connect Ferdinand and issues of faith and life?
I think going the other way is certainly peace movement. I mean, that's the big thing. It's written in a fascist state, and he's not buying into that at all. And so I think that there are all kind of ways that it's appropriate for choosing to follow Jesus instead of a different way.
Good, thank you. Yes.
I have one and only tip, and I don't know if people do it, but if you find a book that's too long for a children's sermon, I take paper clips and I put it between the pages that are a little redundant or oh, well, we're not going to focus on this.
so they don't riot if you skip a page. They can't really tell if it's paper clipped together.
So the tip is that if you're reading a story to a children during children's time and it's too long, you paper clip the pages, so because the kids will know if you skip a page and they're going to tell you. Oh, they will. They will. Yeah. And you know, one of the joys right now of doing children's times too is if you have a screen in your congregation and you can, you know, show it. And the beauty of that is, and of course that was the pivot, you know, you had the 2 weeks to pivot in theological, at least at Vanderbilt in Divinity School, they had 2 weeks to turn all these professors who didn't know a clue about how to do this. You know, it was really amazing. I fortunately wasn't teaching at that moment. I just sat back and watched them trying to figure it out. I had 6 months to try and figure it out. So if you've got added screens into your congregation, they're appropriate places. If you use a Kindle and show the story that way, then the whole congregation can see it rather than if you're sitting there with the children and they can't. Or if you've got cameras and they can see, if you're physically holding the book, they can see it. So it makes it, because everybody wants to see the pictures, right? Yeah. Any other stories? Anything else from our virtual folks? Are we good? So are we going to do the? We want to leave you with one last story, so just sit back and enjoy. Nashville has this wonderful used bookstore, and I was dumping stuff from my sister's move, and I have to browse the children's books, of course, and I just found this one, and I love used bookstores because what somebody else is getting rid of might be a treasure for you. So Carol's just want you to invite you to sit and calm. You've been doing so much this whole week. Just take a breath, breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, move your shoulders, get ready for story time. You don't have to answer a question.
And you will not see the illustrations because we don't have this on Kindle.
It's not on Kindle.
But just listen. A Room of Your Own, a story inspired by Virginia Woolf's famous essay by Beth Kephart. Through the jam and cram of her house she goes, through the kitchen, up the stairs, into the garden, onto the path. The sky is steel, but there will be blue. The rooks are quiet, but soon they'll swoon. And on and on and on she goes to that room she calls her own. Here it is, her place to think, her place to dream, her place to be. And you, where do you go to think, to dream, to be? Is the room you love best small or big? Is it a glorious mess or whistle clean? Does it have walls? Does it need a roof? Your room is your room. It can be anything. Is the shade beneath a tree the room of your own? Or is it the stream of sun dazzling in beside the nest between the leaves? Okay. Is it the cool step of a city stoop near the jump rope swish and the sidewalk talk? Or is it the spill of a sill with a view or the back of a bus as it zooms by? Is it the rug on the floor of the store your room? All those books and all those tales just within reach, just for you? Is the corner of the kitchen table your very own? Or is your room the cool beside the tail of the cat, behind the tablecloth, where nobody has found you yet? Or the cone of light inside a bedsheet fort, or the private dream inside the night's deep dark? One needs a room to be one's excellent, imagining, day and night dreaming self. One needs a room to think, to dream, to be, to write. The end. So, with that, go looking for your room if you haven't already found it. And go in peace and enjoy the stories that God has given us. Have safe travels home tomorrow or whenever you're leaving.